Today marks 1 year. 1 year since Vicha Ratanapakdee tragically died from his injuries after being violently pushed on his morning walk, walking here in Vista. We gather here today to remember Grandpa Vicha and to honor him as a symbol in the movement to stop Asian hate. We gather here also to remember the countless other Asian victims throughout the country who have been senselessly beaten, killed, stabbed. Today's Asian Justice March in San Francisco is the center of a national event. There are parallel rallies happening right this minute in New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, Atlanta, and Philadelphia. It was a massive national coordinated effort led by San Francisco's own Asian American leader, Charles Jung. Today's rally is about all of you, the amazing community gathered here today to unite and empower the community in a time of crisis. I ask each of you, how did you feel when you heard that an Asian American elderly man was pushed and killed while on his morning walk here in San Francisco? How did you feel when you heard that 6 Asian American women were gunned down and killed in an Atlanta spa? And how did you feel in May of 2021 when you heard that 2 elderly Asian American women were stabbed with a knife while on Mid-Market at 4th and Market in May of 2021? To see this again and again has been traumatizing for the Asian community. To see people who look like us treated this way, it's inhumane. We must not stand for it. We don't deserve it. These are our friends, our family, fellow immigrants. I ask each of you, let's please turn our fear and our anger into something meaningful. Let's rise above it. To our allies gathered here today, please help us turn thoughts and prayers into change and justice. Whether it be increased funding for Asian American nonprofits providing resources to victims, legislative change, education reform to include the history of Asian American struggle, let's keep demanding progress. We deserve better. Please join the Asian American community in the movement to keep us safe for our elders, for our children, and future generations. Now it is my honor to present the 45th mayor of the city and county of San Francisco and a native San Franciscan, Mayor London Breed. She has prioritized victims' rights and resources, and she has recently appointed a policy advisor for victims' rights with over 30 years of experience to help ensure that victims are heard and provided resources and supported. Please join me in welcoming Mayor London Breed.
Thank you all so much for coming here today. I am so grateful to know Vicha's daughter Amy and his son-in-law Eric, but I wish we didn't meet under these circumstances. They are wonderful people. Amy's dad came to this country to help them raise their children. And I know many of us, with our cherished relationships with our mothers, our fathers, our grandmothers, our grandfathers, I know when we saw that video, it was heartbreaking. It still is heartbreaking. I still feel a lot of the pain and the hurt. And sadly, that never goes away. But it sure does give folks comfort when so many people come together to express support, to help to uplift this family, this community, the people in our API community who have been unfairly attacked in this city and in this country because of divisiveness and hate, which we have made clear time and time again as we come together that we will not tolerate it. We will never give in to it. We will never support it. We will stand together. We will stand together against it.
Yes.
This year, marking the 1-year anniversary of Papa Vicha's death, has signified a movement all over the country. Today, we come together knowing that there have been other victims, sadly, in this city and in this country. We come together to remember them, to make sure that they are not forgotten, to make sure people understand how it impacts families and communities, the hurt and the pain, the suffering. And I am reminded of Dr. King at a time like this. Dr. King, who his whole life was about bringing people together, and the hatred that took him from us. But his message stands true today, now more than ever. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And today, the love that you all bring to Papa Vicha's family and to others who have lost loved ones to this hate and violence, this is what's going to dominate today. This is what's going to dominate in the future. This is what's going to bring us together and keep us together despite what people try to do to tear us apart. It's been a tough 2 years. And let us all remember, we've all lived through this pandemic. Our children have suffered. Our seniors, in some cases, have suffered in isolation. The fact that we're here today signifies hope. It signifies hope for a better future, of what we can do when we do come together, of what we can do when we drive out that hate with love. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for supporting Vicha's family. Thank you for supporting all of the families of the people whose lives we lost far too soon. And thank you for choosing love. Thank you.
Next, we will hear from San Francisco District 2 Supervisor Stefani, whose district includes this neighborhood we're standing in right now, and Vista. Supervisor Stefani has introduced the San Francisco Victims' Rights Initiative to provide support and services to all victims by establishing an Office of Victim and Witness Rights and right to civil counsel for victims of domestic violence. Supervisor Stefani has been active and a committed ally to the Ratanapakdee family ever since Vicha's passing.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. We are here to commemorate the 1-year anniversary of the murder of Grandpa Vicha, to honor the victims of all Asian hate crimes and violence, and most importantly, to commit to action, to do everything in our power to make sure that it stops. Grandpa Vicha's story has haunted me since the first day I saw that video. Knowing that he moved to the United States to be close to his eldest daughter and his grandchildren. 84 years old, still taking his daily hour walks through this beautiful neighborhood. Wasn't bothering anyone when he was violently shoved to his death. Just breaks my heart. And unfortunately, it was one of the many attacks on our AAPI community in San Francisco last year. I cannot believe the report that came out. It was so shocking to me last week to show that hate crimes against our AAPI community have risen by 500%. It is absolutely unacceptable. And another report, 1 in 5 Asian Americans have experienced a hate incident this past year, whether or not that's verbal harassment, shunning, or physical assault. It absolutely has to stop. I want to thank Vicha's incredible daughter, Monthanus, who's just been so brave and so courageous through all of this. I know we've talked, and I'm very close with my father, and to know what she's been through, to know what her family's been through, and for her to turn this tragedy into action, to work tirelessly to amplify the voices of our AAPI community and raise awareness to do everything in her power to make sure what happened to her father doesn't happen to anyone else ever again. So I thank her and I honor her. Also, I want to thank her and her family for entrusting me with renaming of this stairway right here, the Vicha Ratanapakdee Way. I'm hoping that in doing so, it will commemorate and memorialize this tragic death as a symbol of a movement towards equality, anti-discrimination, and solidarity with our AAPI community. And I want to be very clear, though, doing things like this is not enough. Just merely coming to these events is not enough. We have to take action. Our actions have to speak as loudly as our words. We must hold accountable those who commit these crimes against our AAPI community. And we must demand that those that have the power to hold people accountable actually do. And not only that, we must do everything we can to support the victims of these callous acts. I was absolutely shocked last week. The news blew my mind, considering what's going on with crime in San Francisco and crimes against our AAPI community. But to see the shaming of a victim, Mr. Onlay, and the twisting of facts in that case, even accusing him as being the aggressor, it shocks the conscience to see anyone engage in victim shaming, especially knowing that facts are being left out. When a victim says, it was the most brutal, terrifying, and humiliating experience of my life, you believe him. You don't come after him. When you know attacks against Asians are up 500%, when we just gathered at a vigil for an Asian woman who was pushed to her death in the New York subway, you do not go after victims. To have any level of government not honestly conveying the facts of a brutal hate crime and blaming the victim is truly reprehensible, and it must be called out, because if not, it places our entire AAPI community at risk. Just this Friday afternoon, a Thai Chinese American was punched in the face and ear near City Hall after picking up his marriage license. I used to be the county clerk overseeing people in the county clerk's office getting their marriage license, getting married, the happiest day of their life. And this man comes out to be punched in the face and ear. And thank God for the good Samaritans were there that helped the attack stop before it could have gotten worse. But sadly, that wasn't his first time he was victimized. In 2019, on his 25th birthday, he was stabbed in an attempted robbery near Safeway at Church and Market. This has to stop. There's too many attacks on our AAPI community, so we must do everything. It's about action. It's not about words. Again, I want to thank Monthanus and her family. Her courage and strength, like I said, is absolutely amazing. I want to thank Mayor Bree for her leadership, for doing everything she can in her power to make this city safe, for putting forth a supplemental to make sure that we have enough police officers and EMTs on our streets, to make sure that there are calls for service that are being answered, and that there are preventative measures to make sure these crimes don't happen in the first place. Also, I want to thank today's organizers, Charles Jung, Justin Zhu, and our MC, Natassia Kwan, and Forrest Liu. We must work together to reverse these acts of crime, these acts of violence against our AAPI community, and I intend to do everything in my power to continue to do so. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Stefani. Next, we will hear from San Francisco's first Asian American City Attorney, David Chiu. City Attorney David Chiu was the first Asian also to serve as the president of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, as well as the first Asian American to represent Eastern San Francisco in the California State Assembly. As the former chair of the California AAPI Legislative Caucus, last year, City Attorney Chiu helped deliver a record state budget investment of $156 million to combat anti-Asian hate. I am honored to call David Chiu my boss. Let's please welcome David Chiu.
Brothers and sisters, good morning. I want to thank you for gathering today as family. Not just as the family of San Francisco, but as a family representing humanity. Last night I had dinner with my father and my 5-year-old son. And my son asked his grandpa, "Grandpa, how old are you?" and my dad said 84. And of course, like all of you, I immediately thought about Grandpa Vicha, who was 84 when he was struck down right here in this corner of our city. And I thought about the fact, as we all have, that Grandpa Vicha could have been my dad, was our grandpa. And I want to say to the Ratanapakdee family, you are our family. We grieve with you, we mourn with you, and we stand with you. We stand with you as San Franciscans. We stand with you from San Francisco to LA, from Chicago to New York, from Philadelphia to Atlanta. America stands with you. 2 years ago, this month, the first anti-Asian violence incidents occurred. There was a Chinese elderly man who was collecting cans in the Bayview, who was beaten. And I want to thank many of you who stood with community there to say, this cannot happen. But what happened? A few days later, there was a Chinese woman who was violently robbed and dragged in the Stockton Tunnel. And so it began. You know about the thousands of incidents that have occurred. There are some who point to individual incidents and say, we don't know if that had to do with race. But we know when you add hundreds upon hundreds, thousands upon thousands of incidents, these are not coincidences. This is racism. Some facts of history. It's been 140 years since this year, when the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed. It's been 80 years from this year, when Executive Order 9066 to intern Japanese Americans was passed, and today we also celebrate Fred Korematsu Day. It's been 40 years since Vincent Chen was bludgeoned to death in Detroit by a baseball bat. And yet here we stand. Our work is not done. So what are we going to do as we come together? Our good mayor quoted Dr. King. I've also been reading a lot about Dr. King, as we do every year this month, who said, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. Well, I just want to thank so many of you, starting with the activists who come together today to say, you are telling the world that our community is silent no more. None of you, none of us asked for these challenges that we have in front of us. But we have to meet the moment. Natassia mentioned last year, working with some of my colleagues in the state legislature, we were able to get a record investment in anti-Asian hate. But let me say this, money is not enough. Money will never bring back Grandpa Vicha. We have so much more work to do. As your city attorney, I will promise to continue to fight for justice. But let me end with one final thought, which is this. My profound hope out of the tragedies is that in a few years, in a couple of decades, if I become a grandpa, for all of us, when we become grandparents, my hope is that our grandchildren come to us and say, Grandpa, I read the history books about what happened in 2020 and 2021 and 2022, about the anti-Asian hate. Grandpa, what did you do during that time? And it's my profound hope that we will all be able to say, we met the moment, we stood together, we fought together, we ended anti-Asian violence, and we did it in the name of Grandpa Vicha. Godspeed.
you so much, City Attorney Chiu. Next, we have California State Senator Scott Wiener, who represents San Francisco, Daly City, Broadmoor, Colma, and parts of San Francisco, South San Francisco in the California State Senate. He is the Vice Chair of the California Legislative Jewish Caucus and the immediate past Chair of the California Legislative LGBTQ Caucus.
Thank you, Natasha, and thank you so much to all the organizers. And I really want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you to Vicha's family for, it's so, to experience that deep a tragedy as a family, there's a temptation just to curl up into a ball and to just grieve in silence with your family and never criticize any family for doing that. But you have chosen in this horrible period of grief to be public and to talk about the harm to your family and to talk about this terrible racist attack and to have, we hope something good come out of this horrific tragedy in terms of coming to terms with this incredibly harmful hatred against the AAPI community that has been going on since the beginning of this country. When you have an attack like this, there's a tendency to just dismiss it as this is just someone who got attacked and it was bad and there will be consequences and we just need to move on. There's always a temptation to do that. And we need to say absolutely not. This isn't just a random attack. This is part of a context of hate and violence against the AAPI community here in San Francisco and across the country. And we know what that context is. We know that we have political leaders in this country who deliberately and explicitly scapegoat the AAPI community. We all heard it, the Chinese flu, Kung flu. They're still saying it today. After all of this, they are still scapegoating our AAPI communities for COVID-19. And that has consequences. Those words have consequences. And one of those consequences is violence. And we need to also be clear that the violence that we're seeing against our AAPI community, and particularly against our seniors, it's not new. It didn't just start with Donald Trump or with COVID. It's gotten worse. It's been around forever. And as long as I have lived here in San Francisco, and I'm pushing 25 years now, time flies, as long as I have lived here, I have seen the reports of particularly AAPI seniors being attacked in Chinatown. That didn't start a year ago. It didn't start with Donald Trump. We can't just blame Donald Trump for this. That's been here in San Francisco for as long as I can remember, for as long as anyone can remember. We know that California has a deeply ugly history towards our AAPI communities. And our city attorneys have talked about that. And that has consequences, and that is still here with us. We are working very, very hard in the state legislature to support our communities in going through this terrible period. As Natasha mentioned, I have the honor of serving as vice chair of our Legislative Jewish Caucus. And we worked for the last few years hand in glove with our Legislative API caucus, including when David Chiu was the chair of that caucus, we miss him by the way, to secure last year $50 million to fund security grants for community-based organizations, for the Jewish community, for our synagogues and our community centers, for our API community, to make sure that the state of California is being a strong partner in keeping people safe and keeping our community institutions safe. And we're happy to do that work, and we will continue to work hard to expand those investments. But I gotta tell you, it really makes me sad that we have to spend time advocating for budget funding to provide security or metal detectors and security guards for our AAPI community institutions, for our Jewish community institutions. That makes me sad. We shouldn't have to do that. I would love to use that money instead to make sure that families have food on the table, to make sure that our kids have after-school programs, to make sure that our seniors have recreational outlets. We could make such good use of that money, but this hatred has forced us to use that money for basic security. And we'll continue to do that, but I look forward to the day where we don't need to fund those security grants anymore, where we can support the basic needs of our entire community. So let's keep fighting, and thank you so, so much for your advocacy.
Thank you so much, Senator Wiener. Now, the woman who has inspired this movement, the woman who has inspired today's event. It is our privilege to hear from Vicha Ratanapakdee's oldest daughter, Monthanus, an incredible woman and community hero in standing against Asian hate. Monthanus' strength in the face of adversity is truly an inspiration to us all. Please give a warm welcome to Monthanus Ratanapakdee.
My father, Vicha, was a kind, family man. He came from Thailand to care for my family. We did not deserve to die the way he did. It's hard to believe it has been over 1 year since he passed. I miss him every day. 1 year ago, my father, Vicha, was walking in this neighborhood when he was violently pushed. When I received the phone call from the police, I felt shocked. And I visited my father in the ICU. I prayed for him to wake up, but my father passed away 2 days later. My father, Vicha, was like a friend to me. We would like to talk about everything. We are here today to mourn his passing. I know my father, Vicha, is looking down on us today. It is meaningful to our family to honor my father and to remember the victim of anti-Asian hate. My father was one of the only people in the village who spoke English well. He admired the American value of equality and the equal rights. He was a gentleman and a lovely grandpa. He loved to take my son to fun sites in this city. He was a man who led with love, not with hate. This has not changed. It is not a temper tantrum. Hate is hate, and we must rise above it. My father, Vicha, would want us all to rise above hate, and he would want us to lead with love. And I know people are scared about the anti-Asian hate in the community. And we must demand action for the justice and all human rights. We need safety for everyone in San Francisco. And we all have a right to stay safe and be able to walk in our neighborhood without fear. We feel so much pain for my father and the other victim of the anti-Asian violence, Asian hate. I know if my father was alive and know about the Justice for Vicha movement and the anti-Asian hate, I know he would tell us to be strong and keep on fighting. I remember my father told me I have to be strong for my young boy, even I'm tired. Many of you are tired to seeing the news about the violence against Asian hate. Please be strong and in memory of my father. And then thank you so much for everyone to being here in the community and the people who have cared so much about the fighting Asian hate. And then thank you so much for the Justin, Forrest, Natassia, Charles Zhang, Liana, Juanita, and Austin Luz, and all the leaders of the AAPI community. Thank you for the Mayor Breed, Supervisor Stefani, City Attorney David Chiu, Senator Wiener, and so many others. I cannot name them all today. And thank you so much for everyone to being here today. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you so much, Monthanus, for your continued bravery in this movement. Now we will start the Asian Justice March. We will march to the exact site where Vicha Ratanapakdee was attacked on January 28th of 2021. The route that we will be walking on this march retraces the footsteps of Vicha on his last day. So pause to think about that. And also, please give a moment for the organizers and elected officials to move to the front and follow us down this hill. Thank you so much.
Somebody's going to watch.